The story of Ivan Kononov, a tale of betrayal, war, and a great escape. World War II wasn't just about epic battles and heroic stands. It was a time when ordinary people faced impossible choices. Fight to the death, surrender, or betray everything you once stood for. One man, Ivan Kononov, a Cossack from the heart of Russia, made a choice that shocked the world. His story isn't just about turning his back on his country, it's a saga of survival, revenge, and a cunning escape from justice. This isn't your average history lesson. It's a deep dive into a life that'll leave you questioning where the line between hero and villain lies. Let's unpack how a guy from a proud Cossack family became one of the war's most controversial figures. The big picture: war, economics, and a broken nation. To get why someone like Kononov made the choices he did, we need to set the stage. By 1941, the Soviet Union was a mess. The Russian Civil War, Stalin's brutal purges, and forced collectivization had left the country reeling. Historians estimate that in the 1930s, over 1.8 million people were victims of Stalin's purges, with millions more suffering from famine and deportations. The Cossacks, a fiercely independent group with a warrior tradition, got hit hard. Their way of life was crushed, and many were executed or sent to labor camps. When World War II kicked off, Nazi Germany steamrolled through Soviet territory. By late 1941, they'd captured about 3.8 million Soviet soldiers. That's a staggering number. Whole armies were wiped out or taken prisoner. The Nazis, seeing an opportunity, started recruiting collaborators from among the prisoners, banking on their hatred for Stalin's regime. According to records, about 1.4% of those prisoners, roughly 53,000 people, chose to work with the enemy. Some were driven by ideology, others by the desperate need to survive brutal POW camps. Kononov was one of them, but his story stands out for its scale and audacity. Chapter 1: A tragic start and the seeds of betrayal. A rough childhood and a burning grudge. Ivan Kononov was born in 1900 into a proud Cossack family. His dad was an officer, and life in their Cossack village promised honor and tradition. But the Russian Civil War, 1917 to 1923, turned everything upside down. The Bolsheviks, who took over Russia, saw the Cossacks as a threat. They executed Kononov's parents and his older brother. Later, in the 1930s, Stalin's purges claimed to more of his brothers. These losses hit Kononov like a freight train, planting a deep hatred for the Soviet system. But he was smart. He kept his feelings under wraps, biding his time. To survive in the new Soviet world, Kononov pulled a bold move. He faked his identity. He claimed he was born in 1906 to a working-class family, hiding his Cossack roots. In 1922, he joined the Red Army, which seems like a crazy choice for someone whose family was destroyed by the Bolsheviks. But maybe it was his way of staying in the game, keeping his enemies close while waiting for the right moment to strike. Rising through the ranks, Kononov wasn't just a survivor, he was a natural leader. In 1924, he enrolled in the VTS IK military school, where he stood out as disciplined and talented. His career took off, and by 1938, he'd graduated from the prestigious Frunze Military Academy and earned the rank of major. During the Winter War with Finland, 1939 to 1940, he led a battalion trapped behind enemy lines. Even though he toyed with the idea of deserting, he fought on, knowing the Finns couldn't beat the Soviets. His bravery and tactical smarts earned him the Order of the Red Star, a big deal in the Soviet military. But behind the medals and promotions, Kononov was a ticking time bomb. The Soviet regime had taken everything from him: his family, his heritage, his pride. The war with Germany gave him a chance to rewrite his story, and he was ready to take it. Chapter 2: The Turning Point. Betrayal. 1941. The Red Army's collapse. By the summer of 1941, the Soviet front was crumbling. Nazi forces were tearing through, encircling entire divisions. Kononov, now commanding the 436th Infantry Regiment, found himself in the thick of it. Early in August, his unit made a stand at Roslavel, holding back the German advance. But soon after, his regiment was surrounded near Onitsha. That's when Kononov made a decision that would go down in history as one of the war's boldest betrayals. On August 22, 1941, Kononov reached out to German General von Schenkendorf and offered to surrender his entire regiment in exchange for a deal. He wanted to form an anti-Soviet fighting force. The Germans, always on the lookout for ways to weaken the Red Army, jumped at the chance. That day, the 436th Regiment officially switched sides, joining the German Wehrmacht. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment defection, it was a carefully planned move by a man who'd been plotting his revenge for years. Why did he do it? To understand Kononov's choice, you've got to look at the bigger picture. Many of his soldiers were Cossacks, people whose families had suffered under Soviet rule. Kononov had handpicked men who shared his anti-Bolshevik views, building a loyal core within his unit. Plus, the Nazis saw the Cossacks not as Slavs, but as a distinct ethnic group with supposed Aryan roots, making them valuable allies. Kononov saw an opportunity not just to survive, but to strike back at the system that had destroyed his life. But was it all about revenge? Picture this: you're surrounded, your men are exhausted, and there's no way out. Surrendering meant brutal POW camps, maybe even death. Kononov's decision was practical, but deeply personal. He wasn't just saving his skin, he was settling a score. Chapter 3. From Soviet major to Nazi officer building a Cossack army, Kononov didn't just defect, he went all in. He started recruiting Soviet POWs to build his own fighting force. In the Mogyla POW camp, 4,000 prisoners volunteered to join him. He carefully selected 400 Cossacks and 150 other soldiers to bolster his ranks. By October 1941, his unit, called the 102nd Volunteer Detachment, had over 1,500 fighters, including 77 officers. This wasn't some ragtag group. Under Kononov's command, they scored a big win at Shepelevichy, wiping out a Soviet paratrooper unit with minimal losses, 92 men compared to hundreds on the Soviet side. Kononov proved he was a skilled commander, and his unit gained a reputation for ruthless anti-partisan operations. In 1942, operating around Vyazma and Belarus, they carried out brutal attacks on civilians, earning praise from the German High Command. Kononov was promoted to lieutenant colonel in the German army, a wild twist for a former Soviet officer. The economics of collaboration during the war wasn't just about ideology, it was also about survival. The Nazis exploited occupied territories, seizing millions of tons of grain, livestock, and other resources. Historians estimate that between 1941 and 1943, Germany took about 9 million tons of grain, 3 million tons of potatoes, and 2.5 million head of cattle from the Soviet Union. This left local populations starving, but collaborators like Kononov got access to food, shelter, and privileges that kept them going. The cost, though, was steep. Kononov's Cossack units, including his own, were involved in looting and brutal crackdowns. In 1943, his unit, now part of the 1st Cossack Cavalry Division, was sent to Yugoslavia. There, they gained notoriety for vicious reprisals against Serbian civilians and widespread looting. These actions earned Kononov 2 Iron Crosses, but they also cemented his reputation as a war criminal. Chapter 4. Defeat and the Great Escape. The fall of the Cossack Division. By 1944, the tide was turning against Germany. Kononov's unit, now the 5th Don Cossack Regiment, took heavy losses fighting Tito's partisans in Yugoslavia. They scored one last major victory in December 1944, crushing a Soviet regiment near Pitomacha. But the writing was on the wall. As the Allies closed in, many of Kononov's men were captured and handed over to the Soviets, where they faced harsh punishment, labor camps, or execution. Kononov, though, was one step ahead. He'd prepared fake documents and slipped out of Czechoslovakia, making his way to Austria and then Munich. There, he laid low, living under an assumed identity and avoiding the spotlight. Life on the run. After the war, Kononov made his way to Australia, a country far enough from Soviet reach to feel safe. He lived quietly, steering clear of anything that might expose his past. The Soviets sentenced him to death in absentia, and the KGB hunted for him, but Kononov was a ghost. He died in 1967, reportedly from a heart attack. Some speculate the KGB staged his death as a car accident, but there's no hard evidence. Most likely, he slipped away from justice and died of natural causes. Chapter 5. reflections and lessons from history. How did he get away? Kononov's story begs the question, how did a man responsible for such a massive betrayal escape justice? It comes down to cunning and preparation. He had fake documents ready, chose a distant country like Australia, and kept a low profile. Plus, after the war, Western nations weren't always eager to hand over collaborators to the Soviets, especially if they weren't causing trouble. But there's a deeper question. Was Kononov just a traitor, or was he fighting back against a system that destroyed his family? His story isn't black and white. It's a messy mix of motives, fears, and ambition. He was a man shaped by a brutal era, caught between loyalty and survival. The economics of betrayal collaboration was part of a larger system of exploitation. The Nazis used collaborators to control occupied territories, saving their own resources. In return, collaborators got access to scarce goods and a shot at survival. But after the war, most faced dire consequences: imprisonment, execution, or social ostracism. Kononov, the rare exception, lived out his days in hiding, but it's hard to imagine he found peace, always looking over his shoulder. Ivan Kononov's story is more than a tale of betrayal. It's a lesson about how war and hardship can break a person or push them to extraordinary lengths. It forces us to grapple with tough questions about morality, choice, and consequences. Was he a villain, a victim, or just a man trying to survive in a world turned upside down? Hey, folks, this is just one of the wild stories waiting for you on our channel. Hit that subscribe button to catch more history deep dives, and drop a comment below. What do you think of Kononov? Was he a traitor or a man fighting for his own justice? Let's get the conversation going.